Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the show. The Atheist Experience is live December 8th, 2002. I'm your host, Martin Wagner. Ashley Perrien, my co-host, as always. And today we're very happy to have back on the show Dr. Alan Glasser here to talk about many interesting things. I'm glad to have you back in town.
Glad to be back.
Trip, but you're going back home right away, though, aren't you?
Tomorrow.
Oh, well. Never have you down here long enough. Well, next time we'll just get a big butterfly net, and there'll be nothing you can do about it. Our show is sponsored by Atheist Community of Austin, a nonprofit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. ACA has weekly meetings every Sunday morning, 10:30 a.m. at Hot Jumbo Bagels, which is located downtown, 307 West 5th Street, there we go, between Guadalupe and Lavaca, except for the very first Sunday of each month. That's when we have our Longhorn Room First Cafeteria Lecture Series, and the next one of those will be January the 29th. 30th, 31. So it'll be, trying to count it out, I don't know, but it'll be coming up. And we don't know who our speaker is yet, but as soon as we do, we'll tell you. That's how it works around here. So, thank you very much for joining us. Just some other quick opening announcements. Godless Gamers. Every Monday night at Russell and Virginia's house. Contact them for info. And Atheist Happy Hour takes place Thursday evenings, 7:30 p.m.-ish, 7:30-ish. People trickle in all night long at Antonio's Tex-Mex, which is near the intersection of Highway 183 and I-35. The Nonprofits is our weekly internet radio program. Was there one yesterday? I don't think so.
Yes, there was
one. Okay.
I heard it.
Probably were on it.
I was on it.
There you go. Yeah. That's every Saturday afternoon at 2 p.m., hosted by Jeff D. And it's 90 minutes of interesting news and talk and yelling back and forth, and it's a lot of fun. It's at the atheistnetwork.com website. It's an MP3 stream, and there is a live chat room feature that you can use to interact with the show. So it's a terrific show, and that's every Saturday afternoon, 2 o'clock p.m. The University Atheists and Agnostics is our student organization. It was put together by our very own Charles Tabanny. Extremely successful first semester they've had, and their next semester meetings they're just setting up right now. They don't know the room. Right now they're still meeting at Parlin 310, room 4 o'clock p.m., but next semester, I guess the room and time will be announced. But that's happening University Atheists and Agnostics. If you are a UT student faculty member, there's a group for you now, which is great. So room TBA Friday, and uaa@mail.utexas.edu is the email address to get more information about that group. So let me see. I do believe that is all I have for opening announcements. So to find out more about our fine group and all the lovely people in it, many of whom are packing our studio today like sardines. We've got a great studio audience, everyone.
Yay.
So there we go. Thank you for everyone for turning up. For more information about us, hit atheist-community.org on the World Wide Web, and you'll just see all kinds of pictures of our smiling faces. And just I
believe the picture that's up there of me is so old and really wacky looking. I've just got the weirdest expression on my face.
That's
I know, it's sort of like the one that you had in a newsletter a month ago. It's not like that,
my used car
but it's
salesman.
just the similar, that's not right. That's not normal. So.
It's like, this man has just been seen.
I look like Santa Claus at about 25. That's how I imagined Santa Claus would look at 25.
Okay. Like, I'm going to rule the world in this toy business someday. You just watch me. All right, well, I'll avoid elf jokes, and we'll just move right on. Let's see, before you get onto the news,
Right.
we had a caller last week. The guy who was talking about afterlife and near-death experiences, and remember that? That was our fun caller.
Okay.
What about the guy? He went up to heaven, and he...
Oh, the medical miracles guy, yeah.
That guy, yeah. And talked about how this fellow's book, Dannion Brinkley, where his book Saved by the Light, in which he describes apparently what happened to this guy was he got hit by lightning. If that happened to me, I'd see all kinds of stuff too. But in his book, he talks about going up to heaven and like visiting with angels and stuff, and receiving all of these predictions of future events, like the fall of the Soviet Union and the Gulf War. Well, guess when this book was published? 1994. That's real easy.
Just a couple years later.
Yeah.
But I saw it first, I swear it.
Well, that thing that happened last year, well, the angels told me about it 10 years ago, really. But anyway, here's
prediction is especially difficult, especially about the future.
Yeah. But anyway, he has 10 billion websites devoted to himself. And again, he's just another guy who's come up with stories that he can sell books with. And like one review read said that dying has become a really great way to make a living if you're a writer. But here's a link to one skeptical article that I found, not just about him, but just a whole near-death experiences thing. This is from the Center for the Scientific Investigation for Claims of the Paranormal. That's a whole different sort of thing. But they published Skeptical Inquirer. And here's the URL of a really neat article that I read. And then, of course, at the Skeptics Dictionary website at skeptic.com has a whole a page on near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences and moving towards the light and then links to other resources there. But this is some interesting reading. And wait a minute. What is that? Oh. It happens every week, people. Don't worry about it. Okay. Dr. Glasser, you have a very interesting topic today. I think you have some views on the knotty issue. It comes up all the time, of secular morals, especially vis-a-vis religious morals. And it's interesting because it seems every week we get calls on that subject. And I know you have a really interesting point of view about it. We're going to let Ashley do the news, and then we'll get right into talking to you about that very thing.
Okay.
Thanks.
And I'll keep the news relatively short.
Okay.
Because there wasn't really all that much going on. A lot of pedophilia stuff, but don't have too much on that. I always try and avoid those stories if at all possible.
Yeah. Ew. Kind of like...
we had the story a couple weeks back, or I don't know if it was last week or the week before, about Roy Moore.
Oh, yeah.
And his nice big granite monument in Alabama that the court said, nope, got to come down. Now the court's attorneys who won the federal court order for Alabama's Chief Justice to remove a Ten Commandments monument from the state's judicial building have asked for $704,000 in legal fees and expenses. They are now asking him to pay them back for their 1-week trial and more than 1 year of planning for the trial. So that is going on. Motion filed on Monday. Asked for that for six attorneys' fees.
Wow. So these are the guys who have sued him.
Yes.
And now his appeal, I assume, is in progress.
I would guess so. I haven't heard
has been filed. At least, I'm sure.
I would guess so. I haven't heard anything about it. They don't have any stories on it yet.
Okay. So. Well, we're following this one very closely. Because this will be, I think, pretty much a precedent-setting case.
Yeah.
For similar cases around the country. Did you see the thing in the Chronicle this week about this guy Van Orden? Who,
I did not.
Who's the fellow here? He's the homeless attorney.
Yeah.
Who filed the suit here that was dismissed
to get the monument taken down. Yeah.
But interesting, some things about him, and he seems to be a rather curious character. I mean, he has some. I'm a little puzzled at his motives. And, if anyone knows him, it'd be interesting to or has dealt with him.
I believe I heard. Somebody mentioned at the meeting this morning that he may be a speaker sometime.
Okay.
I don't know if we're trying to or if we are or what, but it seems like I remember hearing Michelle.
Well, it'd be interesting. The article discusses some iffy ethical things in his past.
Okay.
And that he did when he was practicing and why he was pretty much given the boot. And so I'm just a little curious to know. I mean, there's more about this guy. But anyway, but that's an ongoing fight. And of course, one thing that he does say in that article when they interview him, that is a salient point, is that, this is, he's not suing God, right? I mean, he's not trying to get religion out of America. He's trying to get the government out of religion.
Yeah.
And that is a point that is commonly misunderstood and distorted by the right wing.
Yeah.
Who want this to seem like, it's these evil, godless liberals who want to
make sure that they can never practice religion in any way.
Yeah, they want to just make Christianity illegal.
Not really.
Yeah. So, but again, they can make that point and whip up people's emotions, and in so doing, they sort of kind of win the case just on that basis.
And again, I still think they take advantage of misunderstandings of wording. Again, if we want to get religion out of public offices. Mm-hmm. When we say public offices, we're meaning government-sponsored offices, government offices.
That you and I pay for with our tax money.
Public, to the general people, means outside of their homes.
Yeah.
You know, so,
public, yeah, that's
so
right.
if you have a Ten Commandments monument on your front lawn, that's public.
Yeah.
You want to stamp out all public religion? Well, not really, no.
No. It's what you put in your front. That your front yard is your private property.
Exactly.
That's right. It's a common misunderstanding. The word public in this context refers to taxpayer-funded government property.
And again, they're taking advantage of that.
Yeah.
I would expect.
Oh, sure. Yeah, of course, yeah.
So.
Well, this will keep you up to date.
Yeah, I'd like to see anything else that comes out of that case. I'm sure there'll be the appeals and the stories about the appeals, so can't wait for that to come out.
Well, Roy Moore will continue to be a complete cretin about the whole
thing. Yeah. Okay, well, said I wouldn't go into the pedophilia stuff, but why not?
What's a Sunday afternoon without a little...
Basically, this is going back to Boston and Cardinal Law.
Yeah.
And all the fun that he had, shuffling priests around.
Yeah, and now we're finding out that there were like all these, that in addition to that, there were all these priests up there who were big cokeheads. And there's like this big scandalous, I mean, it was just, they were out of control up there in Boston.
I know, I mean, it's worse than a college frat dorm. So.
Well, you know.
Big paddles on the walls and such.
Let's move elsewhere, shall we?
But anyway, faced with claims that could exceed $100 million, the Archdiocese of Boston may seek safety in Chapter 11 of the U.S. Bankruptcy Code.
Yeah. Well, that's surprising.
They are claiming that we have no money. How can you sue us?
Well, but that's not surprising at all, right? I mean, that's how anybody... I think any lawyer would have expected them to immediately try to do anything, you know, just...
Yeah. But it's going to be a hard one to sell, they're saying, because real estate holdings in excess of $1.3 billion in Boston. And so I'm sorry, $100 million isn't all that much of $1.3 billion. They can scrape it together without too much trouble.
Yeah. But this is still back to their just not wanting to take responsibility for this.
Of course.
Yeah.
And I like what Law has to say, too. Law has said he wants to remain as cardinal in order to help close wounds inflicted during his tenure.
That he caused.
Yes,
well,
exactly.
Now, if this is like, I don't... Gee, call me a crusty old cynic, but I don't believe for a second that this is like him showing anything in the way of honest contrition. Ooh, I screwed up, let me make it better. No. If it were that, okay, I could say fine, whatever. But I think that it's probably just the most tactful thing would be for him to bow out gracefully of this mess that he created.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, he overtly and deliberately, you know, protected Chandler and all of these guys who were known.
He know
exactly to be doing what they were doing.
Yeah.
And so it just seems kind of, you know, it's like,
you
know, it's like it's like getting a group of, you know, former you know, SS officers together to do some kind of, you know, open up a Jewish community center to heal wounds, right? It's like,
well, boys will be boys.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, look, maybe your heart's in the right place, but it's probably not just the most tactful.
Yeah, there are better things you could be doing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like just get out of the picture. Let's bring you need
exactly. Just say, look, you know, I messed up. Really sorry.
I quit.
Get out of the way now.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, look, even Nixon had the taste to resign. Good gravy. Yeah.
So, even though he took the responsibility, but not the blame.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
oh well.
Well, that's the latest, or at least a taste of the latest of what's going on with the Boston fun.
Boy. Okay.
And finally, quick story here. The man behind Bigfoot has died. It was all a hoax. The man who used 16-inch foot-shaped carvings to create tracks that ignite the Bigfoot legend has died. He was 84. Basically, him and his family had heard all the stories about the abominable snowman out in wherever that is. And they said, well, it'd be kind of cool if we had one over here. So they went and made one up.
So the whole Bigfoot American legend started with this guy.
Yep. Started with this guy. And they made carvings of the feet. They made up some sounds of, ooh, this is what it sounds like. And they dressed up in a big outfit, went out in the woods and took some pictures eating a frog. So this is apparently what some people do with their Saturday afternoons. And so, that's, the family has all confirmed that, it's just a big fraud.
Well.
So.
Oh, well, people. Now, I'm of two minds about this, okay? I mean, on the one hand, sure, somebody like, let's play a prank. That's fun, right? I mean, the whole, the Cardiff Giant was like that. But then, what has been the end result of this now? There is this whole realm of pseudoscience and superstition now. There's practically this little secular religion about, that's sprung up around Bigfoot. And now there's this entire segment of the population who now has had a new delusional meme plugged into their brain. And I just don't think that this kind of, spreading around this kind of thing is good for the human race. Just spreading falsehood, even if he probably didn't intend that. He probably didn't think it was wringing his hands. It's a good practical joke that went a bit too far. Like Dr. Evil, he's probably thinking, let's fake some folks out. I'm sure he never would have foreseen. But this could stand as an object lesson. Sometimes, let's say the guys who started doing the crop circles. Same thing has happened. They themselves came out and said, "Look, we just do this with the rope and boards, and it's no big deal." But you can't do it. The diehard alien worshippers just are having none of it, right? So, what you think might be a harmless little prank ends up just, you never underestimate people's predilection and fondness for being deluded, just believing nonsense.
Any form of denial to make sure that their little dream is held on to.
So he's. Bye-bye, Mr. Bigfoot guy.
Yep.
Okay. So that's it?
That's it for the news.
Wow. Okay. Dr. Glasser, once again, great to have you back. Now, your topic today has to do, again, with secular morality, something that a lot of our callers on this program are very fond of bringing up, this whole idea, many of the Christian callers that we get, that you can't have morals without God. And as I see it, this is rooted, of course, it's not just rooted in their teachings, the religious teachings, but specifically, hang on, folks, some mic issues. If this doesn't work, nothing will. But specifically, what is part of their teachings are that human beings are hopelessly corrupt. And so it is therefore impossible. I mean, like, not hurting anybody is such a strange alien idea that no mere human being could even think about it. Okay, these precepts, moral precepts, have to be handed to us from a divine authority because human beings are innately corrupt. Now, I mentioned that myself, as an atheist and as a humanist, I reject that premise. I think it's not a problem for human beings to come up with a code of morals because we are learning creatures. And we exist in this culture in which we have to interact and relate to one another. We're a social species. And so in order for us to survive as individuals, we have to survive as a species. And so we have come up with these moral precepts over thousands of years through a trial and error process that help us live. Now, what are your thoughts on what secular morality is about?
Okay, well, in my view, the defining characteristic of an atheist, in contrast to a theist, is that whereas a theist looks to some external authority, some God, to hand us our reasons for believing things, we rely on ourselves instead to come up with these ideas. For example, when among theists, the book of Genesis serves as an explanation for how the world came to be, and for most of us thinking atheists, we turn instead to our own senses and our own rationality, our own reason, to construct a science of how the world works. Similarly, when it comes to the issue of what we value value, what we hold to be good and right, instead of turning to something like the Ten Commandments, something given to us from on high, we look inside ourselves, and just as we use sense perception to perceive the world in the case of questions of fact, we use introspection into ourselves to find what feels right. We understand that, and we understand that there are competing goals that we may want to achieve, and we use our reason to balance among these goals. For example, we have individual needs, and we also have the needs to maintain a stable society, all of which comes down to the good of the individuals who live in the society. For the most part, I think this concept of introspection as the source of our values and our morality works very well. And I think, for the most part, we have sufficient commonality among us. We are all human. We have the same types of bodies. We have the same types of needs, that we have not too much difficulty coming to a consensus about what constitutes the good and the right. Mm-hmm. But there are exceptions, and these exceptions bother me because, quite frankly, I don't quite know what to do with these. Okay. I'm thinking of cases such as Adolf Hitler and Osama bin Laden, who look inside themselves, and what they see as the greatest good is to kill Jews or infidels. I don't accept that. I don't think most of us accept that. And yet, when I place the value of introspection above all else, I have trouble coming to my own understanding of on what basis can we reject this. I can think of a number of possibilities. One of them is to say the rule of the majority. I mean, if most of us agree among ourselves as to what's good, and these guys appear to be off in left field, can we reject them on the grounds that the majority rules? Unfortunately, that doesn't work well for us atheists in America, because the overwhelming majority of Americans would reject atheism as a value. And so if we throw ourselves upon the mercy of the majority, we're not likely to do very well. What about the fact that, for example, in the case of Hitler, we finally were able to defeat him in World War II and get rid of him and his supporters and turn modern Germany into a much more acceptable and even admirable society? But then, of course, what we're doing there is relying on might makes right. If he had defeated us, would we have been satisfied with that consequence? So if you reject majority rule and you reject might makes right, what do we have to fall back on to resolve this dilemma among us and our fellow atheists? I am raising this issue because it is a genuine concern to me, and I'm going to suggest that today's discussion be among our fellow atheists, and that unlike most programs on this series, we don't want to dissipate this time refuting
going through these religious
with a theist point of view.
Yeah, I think, and that is what we're going to be doing today on the show. If your viewers at home are watching, what Dr. Glatz would like to do for today's show is discuss with other atheists exclusively what it is that, in the opinion of atheists, forms a sound basis for a secular moral system.
How do we come to grips with this, what I see as a dilemma in our own paradigm?
Yeah. Well, I can give you my point of view. And we'll go ahead and we'll put the number up on the screen to let calls start racking up. But I have some opinions on this, and I'm sure Ashley will say a few things, and we'll talk a bit more. But again, we're going to be talking to other ACA members on the phone today, as well as just other atheists and unbelievers who want to call today. And Christians will be happy to, we always leave our phone lines open for you, but next week we'll be happy to talk to you about what you guys want to talk about. First off, getting back to just taking it from the very beginning, I don't think that it's true that we as atheists we certainly don't look to divine or supernatural sources for our moral precepts. And it is true that we are introspective, but not exclusively so, because as human beings, we are part of a culture that has been established and has existed now for centuries and centuries. And so we've been born into that culture. And in that culture, there are all different kinds of influences at work, right? Among which, religion is very prominent influence, but there are other political, economic concerns, all of which serve to form the basis of the world we live in and then the moral precepts that help that world work. So, even though we do reject the idea that there's some big invisible magic man making all the rules, we still have sort of been, from birth, been given a handy set of moral precepts that work. Now, I think that I've often said to Christians that my opinion is, of course, that human beings created the gods that they worship. So to say that morals come from God really is no different than saying morals came from human beings. Because if you talk to a believer and you ask them for how they view their God and how they define their God, they'll basically give you, in many cases, this sort of idealized view of what they would like to be. It's like it's this idea of human perfection.
And man created God in his own image.
His own image, right. So that's why when you have a guy like Fred Phelps, the gay basher, that guy, his view of God is as big a violent homophobe as he is. On the other hand, the little old lady from Pasadena, on the other hand, has, God is a very nice guy who probably will sit and drink tea with you and crochet. It's a very different idea.
My God happens to be a physicist.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not. It's not like we're born blank slates and we have to come up with all of this ourselves. But it is true that in specific situations we are presented with dilemmas in which it seems that the given moral precepts might not necessarily apply. And this often comes up to a situation that many religionists absolutely despise, which is what we call situational ethics, or moral relativism. And Christians and religious people who are moral absolutists absolutely despise this concept because, of course, it goes against this idea of one all-knowing divine authority who's got it all figured out. But at the same time, though, I think they commonly misunderstand situational ethics or moral relativism as they incorrectly define it to mean moral anarchy. Like you said, just do whatever you want. Look inside yourself. Like the example you gave with bin Laden and Hitler. These guys looked inside themselves, and although I didn't think they exclusively did that, but I'll get to them in a second, and thought, and managed to justify in their own minds committing atrocities.
They also managed to convince a large number of followers, without which it wouldn't have been as damaging as it was.
No. Which says something for, I think, human beings' desire to want to have an authority figure to follow. Which is, again, I think gets us back to many people just can't accept this. Morals have to come from God. They can't come from how can you not be given this from an authority figure? Everything has to come from authority figures. But I think that okay, for example, to get back to everyone's favorite punching bag, Hitler. Okay, like a good example of a moral precept that works most times in most instances would be honesty. Don't lie. Don't deceive people. Don't be a big fat liar. But then, if I were living in Nazi Germany, in the Third Reich, and I knew where a Jewish family was hiding in some attic somewhere, I would lie to the Gestapo. I mean, that's a morally justified lie.
Okay.
But there were, if you're cheating on your wife, You're like, no, honey, I don't. Those must be your panties on the. That's not a morally justified lie. That's being a bad guy. So clearly, there are situations where strict,
I don't know. It seems to me that what you're describing as situational ethics really is a case where you are unsure in your own mind about what are the basic principles that you believe in, and you haven't succeeded in articulating those. That is not necessarily the same thing as not having any principles.
Yeah. Well, in terms of the example I just gave, I think like a good steady principle would be a principle that would apply in most cases would be honesty. That's a good moral precept that you can apply in most cases, but there will a certain instance will come up. Now that's an extreme example that I gave you, but where you would be morally justified in violating that precept.
Yeah. I want to add something to what I said before about the case of Hitler and bin Laden. One way we can characterize their attitude is that they draw a boundary inside of which is we, outside of which is they. Yeah. And in the case of Hitler, clearly the boundary was between Aryans and Jews. In the case of Osama bin Laden, the boundary is between believers and infidels. And furthermore, they argue that when somebody is outside of that boundary, then it's basically open season. Yeah. And you're, fair game for anything you want to do to them. So
Osama and Hitler we're not the only two guys who do that.
No, of course not. I think there's a sense in which all of us have a boundary that we define for ourselves, which could be, in the case of a solipsist, only himself. In the case of others, it could be his family, his town, his state, his nation, the world. It could extend even beyond humans to perhaps all sentient beings. So one of the questions that arises here is there a rational way to draw this boundary? You might also ask, is there a limit to what we're capable, what we're justified in doing to those beyond the boundary? I mean, certainly, even those of us who we regard as of goodwill are very often not vegetarian, and we eat those beyond the boundary.
Not this topic again. I'm getting all kinds of trouble.
What concerns me is that in the absence of a standard for deciding on, evaluating somebody's criterion for values, do we have any basis for rejecting those that we regard as unacceptable to us?
Right. Okay. Well, first, I don't know that I wouldn't say that it's true that atheists are lacking a standard. We're lacking an authority figure. Okay. We're lacking that.
The standard is ourselves. But then, of course, his standard is himself.
Yeah, but see, that's kind of where I disagree. I don't strictly agree that it's not just the standard is ourselves. As getting back to what I said before, I think we're born not on individual little desert islands, but into a civilization and into a culture that existed before us and will exist after us, and so at a certain point, rules are into play. There are rules in play from the time of our birth that we just adopt because they work. And so I think there is a consensus standard.
Even those of us who were born into atheism, such as myself, for example, I'm third-generation atheist, it is not satisfactory to many of us to simply accept what we were taught as children, but we reach a certain age when we want to re-examine the premises. Yeah. And when I come to re-examining these premises, I have difficulty finding a set of axioms, let's say, which I am comfortable in basing my conclusions on. Right.
But,
Well, going back more to the group thing, morals do not exist in a vacuum. You need to have things for them to act upon and be acted upon. And so if there are no people around, killing people or doing something is meaningless without having subjects there.
Yeah.
You had mentioned earlier that if simply the group standard is, what is considered moral, then atheists would have a problem in America. I don't know that it would be that bad. Maybe I'm an optimist, but I don't think the general population of America would say all atheists should be killed, thrown out of the country, or anything like that.
Or forced to convert.
Or forced to convert.
Yeah. Right.
I don't think anything like that would happen.
There's certainly been cases in the past, such as Spain in the 15th century and Germany in the 20th century, when there was an apparently civilized society, and then they changed.
Yeah.
But that was when you had, there's a big institution called the church running the show, and
but again, it wasn't a vacuum.
No.
Even in this country, let's say when slavery was commonly accepted, absolutely the norm, at least in the South, it was that moral. To what we say today, no, it wasn't. To what was said back then, I'm going with the stereotypes here, of course. I'm assuming that it was.
Well, it was the thing that they were able to justify morally. And in order to do it, they appealed to belief systems that they already had.
Yeah.
And in this case, I mean, it's interesting, both the slaveholders in the South and the abolitionists in the North both appealed to a divine authority to make their case. And very conveniently, each side was able to point to biblical scripture, one to condemn slavery and the other to say support. They were able to point to Paul's writings in support of, or at least not condemning slavery.
Yeah.
And I think that the first question that, before we get into the details, I think that the first and most important question that needs to be asked then by anybody who wants to figure out these often confusing issues is, what is morality for? That's the basic question. That's where we got to start from. Just what's it for? What do we have it for? What purpose does it serve? Doctor, what's morality for?
It's for deciding what's good and what's right. And we're all constantly faced with decisions as to how to run our lives, what to strive for, what to fight for, and what to fight against. And we all have some sense of what's good and bad. Is there a way we can come to a consensus about this?
Right. So initially we have to take into consideration the fact that A, we want to survive. B, it helps us if the people around us survive. Either we want them to survive. It's beneficial to us if there are other people to interact with to survive.
You're coming here to the issue of balancing the good of the individual against the good of a stable society. Right. And all of that certainly has to be taken into account. And yet, what do you do with one of these guys who comes out of left field and says something we find totally reprehensible and in fact, achieves a following?
Yeah. Well, what you do in the case, and because I do have a response to that, what you do in cases like guys like Osama and Hitler, is if all they do is have these other ideas and talk about them over a beer every once in a while, well, big deal. Let them have their loony ideas. What happened was when it became very clear with Hitler and now with Osama that, they don't stop at the ideas. They're actually out there to do harm. And they did do harm, and will continue to do harm. And so at that point, when and harm to perfect total strangers, whom they don't know, who are people going about their lives. So when it gets to that point, I think that we are justified as a society in saying, all right, this person has gone beyond an acceptable boundary of just exercising free will and having loony thoughts. They're now exercising upon these thoughts to physically hurt people, to take lives, and they don't see any sign of stopping. So we now do, I think, have a moral justification in stopping this person. Because it could be us next time, or our loved ones, or a whole nation, as it was in the case of an entire population, as in the case of the Jews in Europe. So at that point, I think it's very, very easy, and it's not merely an issue of might makes right. I think that, again, it has to do with a consensus of, look, going out and waging war and killing people willy-nilly is not how societies succeed.
Well, if he says that it is, and we say that it isn't, is it simply might makes right that we manage to stop him? Or is it a matter of rule by the majority, which I think we would all be uncomfortable in accepting?
Well, if it comes down to might makes right or rule of majority, that's what we have to do. If he has a belief or an idea that can stand up to scrutiny and convince other people, then he's got something going that should be listened to. If he doesn't and he can't support his ideas, then we are going to stop him. His idea will be squashed.
Yeah, I mean, you have to take into account the fact that, guys can go, like you say, into themselves and be introspective and come out with all these ideas that it's a really good idea to be Adolf Hitler. But the fact is, they're wrong. So that's the thing that we have to look at.
On what basis can you say that they're wrong?
Well, when someone says that...
Osama has said that we should all convert to Islam. And that's the only condition that he will accept, and he will do whatever it takes, bomb whatever it takes.
To destroy us if we don't.
To destroy us if we don't.
Yeah.
Okay.
The rest of the world, the group, has said, unless you can convince me of a really good reason why that's true, we're going to bomb you. We're going to stop you, because that doesn't make any sense. Now, if he can come around and turn around and say, here's some really good reasons why we should, well, then some people are going to say, maybe he's right. Maybe we should become Islamic. If he can convince us,
in the 17th century,
if not,
Europe became involved in the 30 Years' War, where competing religions did their best to annihilate each other, and they succeeded in reducing the population of Europe by a factor of perhaps 2/3.
Yeah.
I hope we don't need to resort to that.
No.
I hope we can find a way to resort to reason that appeals to most of us, all of us. How can we do that?
Well, I think that, again, and we're going to go ahead and take a caller here, but and we appreciate all the callers being patient. Again, atheists and unbelievers out there, please feel free to throw your 2 cents in on this, because it's a very interesting ongoing subject of debate. But again, to say using reason, okay, we can say that you asked before. Well, how can we say that a guy like Bin Laden or Hitler are right or wrong? Well, if they are being irrational, okay, if their conclusion is I'm standing at the top of this big podium and people are cheering at me, so that gives me the right to kill whomever I feel like it.
Who is the judge of the rationality?
I think that the consensus that is reached when you have, it's not always a majority rule, but when clearly the idea, when you reach such ideas like that would result in actions like that, like the taking of lives, okay, like when actual physical harm, when there are real risks, not just an unpopular idea, not just somebody having an unpopular idea coming to power, but then somebody with an unpopular idea coming to power, and then going out and harming people for no other reason than that either they disagree with them, or they, or their skin is the wrong color, or they're the wrong sexual preference, or the wrong ethnicity.
Of course, one thing you might want to appeal to is some of the concepts in Darwinian natural selection. If a predator chooses to kill his prey, then either the prey does what he can to stop the predator, or he dies out. In the case of Hitler and the Jews, perhaps you could say that either Hitler or the Jews would have to survive the struggle.
But it wasn't just
so we have nature red in tooth and claw. Is there anything better than that we can achieve in civilization?
I don't know. Maybe Fred can tell us. I'm going to take call on line 1. Fred, you're on the air. Hi. Thanks for holding.
I don't spend a lot of time thinking about moral issues myself. It's like the privilege of voting. I don't think a lot about it. I just take it for granted, and I think that a lot of freedom to take these things for granted we owe to the founders of this country, people who dealt with big moral issues like the ones you're talking about, and because of their whatever drove them to America, whatever nice accident made this new country a fertile ground for new thinking, came up with a set of moral ideas by which people should be governed. Came up with the idea of equality, came up with the idea of human rights, and I think a lot of what we take for granted in this country, and the reason a lot of people like me don't think a lot about this issue, is because of that structure that they put in place. Yeah. And if I were to, if I wanted to get into this,
can you speak up a bit, Fred?
Sure. What's the matter?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Keep going. We just speak up a bit.
Okay. I don't have the TV on, so I have no idea how I sound.
Yeah. You're pretty faint, so.
Okay. Am I coming okay?
You're
now?
fine. Yeah. You're fine. Go ahead.
Okay. And
but now these moral precepts, right? That our founding fathers established as the laws of our country, right? They were the result of trial and error too, right? These guys came from European civilizations and saw the mistakes that had been made, what didn't work over there very well, and came over here and tried to do it better. So again, this was a process. The rules and the moral precepts that became the laws that govern our country were born from an existing, pre-existing civilization that maybe did things a lot differently that some folks, didn't really like so much. The guys who moved over here didn't like as well. But morals do change. Moral precepts do change from time to time, don't they?
Well, they certainly change, but still, if you look at the progress of morals in terms of milestones in civilization, there were several prior within the world community prior to the founding of this country, but certainly the founding of this country.
Yeah, control room, we're losing him bad. We can't hear a word he's saying. I'm sorry. We're going to need you to really speak up good and loud.
Okay, how about now?
Okay, that's much better. Yeah.
Okay, I'm shouting, but
sorry,
this will work. Okay. I said if you take a look at the progress, moral progress, in terms of world civilization, there were a lot of milestones, but certainly a big milestone that has influenced a great deal of the world was the founding of this country, the defining of the Constitution. That's where the power of persuasion of the founding fathers substituted for the power of land, religion, and other things for convincing people to form a different country and a power structure which incorporated a moral system, which we are all.
I have a comment on that. It certainly seems very comforting to think that our American system, arising out of the Age of Enlightenment of the late 18th century, was an example of onward and upward, the steady progress of humanity. But unfortunately, it was in the mid-20th century, a couple of hundred years later, that we encountered both Hitler and Stalin, and some of the worst atrocities the world has ever seen. I don't think we can rely on a belief in inevitable progress.
I wasn't thinking of inevitable progress. I was just saying that there are milestones which are positive in terms of
Please speak up.
Yeah, we cannot control him. We cannot hear him at all. Yeah, I'm sorry. We can't hear you at all. Anyway, listen. I think I understand the point you're basically making is that there's a progression that's made, but it's not an infallible process, right? I mean, there are people who simply will rigidly hold on to strident dogmas that have existed for millennia, whether or not those have any practical application. Let me let me give you a reason that one thing that I think is the basis that makes secular morality very sound.
Okay.
And it's a very simple practical consideration. Actions have consequences. So, and this solves so many problems, right? For example, well, how can you justifiably determine, how can you say, well, this guy is right or this guy's wrong? Or they look at the consequences of the actions. You know, if the actions are beneficial, have beneficial consequences, then I'm not necessarily going to say that, I'm not going to say that guy's wrong, even if I don't necessarily agree with all of his ideas. Okay. He may have some ideas about certain aspects of life and philosophy and maybe even religious beliefs that I don't agree with. But if the way in which his actions, if his actions are moral in that the results of them are beneficial to people, and he doesn't go out and burn down synagogues.
In the case of Hitler, certainly his actions.
And we appreciate your call, by the way.
Certainly, his actions had consequences in the sense that it killed 6 million Jews.
Yeah.
Not to mention 20 million Russians.
Yeah.
But we would still have a disagreement with him because he would say, yes, the death of those 6 million Jews was a good thing. The only limitation on the good that he did in his own eyes was that he didn't get the rest of them.
Well, this is where you have to take into account such things as, people can be megalomaniacs. They can be, people can just be all sorts of crazy.
They certainly can.
And so that's where, so it's not right to just say, well, if he can justify it, then he gets to do whatever he wants. If he can come up with what he thinks is a good justification. No, I mean, it does have to kind of fall within a certain criteria of normalcy, does it not?
Now, I might mention that if I were a theist and arguing with you as an atheist, then of course I could say to you, well, among us theists, we can turn to one of the 10 Commandments, which says, "Thou shalt not kill," and that settles that issue.
Right.
Unfortunately, there are those of us who are not prepared to accept that premise that the 10 Commandments are based on, that there was somebody up there who handed them down to Mount Sinai.
Yeah. But then you also have to immediately address the issue of, well, then explain all the Christians who do murder.
Well, yes.
And explain why
they violate those commandments.
Yeah.
But going back a step to what you were saying, actions have consequences. If the action is beneficial, then it is moral.
Who decides what's beneficial?
Beneficial to who?
Well, that's a good point. If it's only beneficial to the guy doing the action.
What is the scope that you're looking for?
Okay, right. Well, now, like, if a bank robber robs a bank and gets away with it, okay, that's beneficial to him, not beneficial to the bank, and not beneficial to the to the people who work there, or maybe some of whom he might have actually shot. So, right. I mean, it's very true that you now have to look. We get back to the consensus idea, and that I mean, you can choose to do all sorts of criminal acts that you might think, well, these will benefit me, and I don't care about the other guy. But then at that point,
so it's benefit to society.
No, but then at that point, it's the consequences of the actions that are the harmful consequences will be greater in quantity and more widespread than the beneficial consequences, which will only be helping the guy who did it, right?
Okay.
So again, you still have harmful consequences, and if the harmful consequences make up 99% of the result of that action, and the only 1% is benefiting the bank robber, then you still have harmful consequences to more people than not.
But again, going back to the beneficial to whom.
Again, you have to this is what is morality for?
Yes.
Is morality just this personal individual thing where it's like, I've got mine and screw you? Or is morality, I'm a content and successful person living in a society that is also successful and at peace?
I might mention that we just passed recently through a period of time when anything did go in the economy. And when a few unscrupulous businessmen succeeded in getting literally billions of dollars away from the mass of the investors.
Yeah.
I suppose there's a question there of how you weigh $1 billion for a single individual against $1,000 for many individuals who lost it.
Yeah.
I think this also gets involved in the Bush tax cut, which benefits not merely the rich, but only the super rich at the expense of all the rest of
Upper
us.
crust 1%. Yeah.
But again, even if you make it not as far-reaching consequences, not something that we can all agree is that's bad, that's good. I have an incurable disease.
No,
I'm sorry to hear it.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
not actually, but anyway.
Oh, yeah, you're growing a hair. I'm sorry.
My head is a prop again.
Okay. I'm sorry. All right.
But again, let's say I have an incurable disease.
All right.
I don't have the money to pay for it.
Uh-oh.
And I don't have any immediate family that's going to, be all torn up about it.
Okay.
Is it justified to kill me? Morally?
To euthanize you?
Yeah.
Well, see, now that's the thing.
Even if I don't want it, I am the one person in the world who says that kind of sucks. I don't really want to die.
Well, then if you don't want it,
The
then
rest
I would
of
say no.
the rest of society is saying, well, in our world today, they say no.
Yeah, I mean, we don't...
That's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
What? However, you're being a drain on everybody in society.
Well,
And so
hang on.
is that, again, the beneficial thing to do?
Well, but now first
from a purely economic
okay, I'll
standpoint,
address this
at
very
least.
specifically. Okay, you're right in that our society isn't like that, right? I mean, we don't live in a society where if somebody gets sick, everybody but the sick person decides, in the dumpster with him. So
They did in Germany.
And they've done it, and there are several species in the animal kingdom that do that sort of thing, and you can probably point to other sorts of primitive tribes. But we have, again, part of the growing process that our civilization has entailed. It has been the development of this idea of individual human rights and of caring for the sick. And it's a concept called altruism, so that we've developed that is probably I don't know speak to any behavioral zoologist or anything, but it's probably unique unto the human race. So that we have developed this whole idea.
No, it's not.
Well, okay, so it's not. But at least insofar as the way we practice it, whereas we will go to great lengths to save the lives of people who are ailing.
Yeah.
So we don't live in that culture. But what if we did live in some kind of species where everybody out there was, agreed with, was willing to euthanize people who didn't want to be euthanized, like or some Brave New World scenario.
No, that's how they got started in the killing game in Nazi Germany.
Yeah. And that society was destroyed. Right?
Well, because might makes right.
Yeah, because the rest of the world...
we beat them.
Because the rest of the world said, no, that sucks, and we'll
I
crush you
don't
if
think
we have
it's
to
not
prove it.
might makes right. I think that it was... we beat him only because... we beat him because he didn't know how to wage a war, right? I mean...
he knew pretty well for a while.
Yeah, but I mean...
Tactical might make
He invented Blitzkrieg.
Yeah.
Maybe it's time to take another phone
Well, we're
call.
waiting to get names. We don't have names. But again, it comes to the point where you first look at the situation and you say, okay, we've got this loose cannon here named Hitler, and he's doing all this crazy stuff.
Or Saddam Hussein, or Osama bin Laden.
Or Osama bin Laden, okay. And this guy is up to stuff that could hurt us. And really badly. Hurt me, my family, you. At that point, you have the moral high ground to use force to bring that person down. And I think that there are...
He thinks he has the moral high ground to bring us down.
Yeah, but we disagree. So, again, who is...
So
Kill him.
might makes right.
Kill him.
But again, it's, but is it might makes right to defend yourself? Is self-defense a might makes right situation? If someone wants to attack you, and you defend yourself successfully, are you just exercising might makes right, or is that a morally justified use of force? I think defense is a morally justified use of force. Might makes right is what Hitler was doing. I have the biggest army.
In the
I
case
have
of
the
Hitler,
SS.
what Hitler argued, independent of how we
Right.
may evaluate his
Yeah.
arguments,
Yeah.
was that the Jews were responsible for destroying his society.
Yeah.
Now, I think most of us regard this as nonsense.
Yeah.
And yet, a large fraction of the German population believed this.
Yeah. Well, they were propagandized into it. They were brainwashed into it. And again, Hitler was nuts. Okay, I mean, he was nuts. He was on
Who's to define nuts?
if someone wants to attack me and kill me, I'm going to say that person's nuts and defend myself against them.
Okay.
Okay. Rock on line 1. Hey, you're on the air. Thanks for calling.
Hey, Martin, can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I hear you just fine.
Okay, great.
Go ahead.
I had a couple thoughts. You started to touch on one of them, and that is the notion of use of force, when it's acceptable and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you guys started to hit on that. I don't really need to talk about that. But back to actions have consequences. There's such a thing as unintended consequences. You can remember we had this thing in this country called prohibition of alcohol. And that was supposed to be a great thing for the country and make us morally better and the citizens would be better, but it turned out to be a disaster.
Yeah, it created the mafia.
It was repealed.
Yeah.
So were the people who instigated prohibition, were they morally wrong? Because actions have consequences.
Yeah. Maybe in retrospect, you could say that they were mistaken.
Misguided.
They were misguided. See, and that's
Right.
that's a great, and again, you came with the perfect term. Guys like Hitler, how can we, he would probably be misguided. Okay? I mean, you could say that when
I like such a soft term.
yeah,
for
it's a
it.
soft term. I prefer
Naughty.
praise. Yeah. Bad Hitler. No. But again, but it's not. But it's that's the nice way of saying you have different degrees of misguided all the way up to loony, right? But again, when someone when someone says, I have this great plan for everyone, and it's going to make everything great, and then they describe it to you, and you use critical thinking to evaluate it and say, well, no, see, I don't see that it will work out this way because I can sort of see this problem, and that problem. And then, the more people evaluate it, if there are more problems than benefits, okay, then I think that, an evaluation of this whole plan that, let's say, someone might have, then that person decides, well, the heck with you, I'm going to go and undertake my plan to do the final solution anyway. Well, I think at that point, that there's a very clear set of grounds to say,
stop him.
Yeah, stop this person. Yeah. But of course, now lunatics don't tend to put their ideas out for public critique before they, tyrants and folks like that. They don't tend to do that.
But one thing they do tend to do is they tend to say, you need to think like I think.
Yeah.
Or else you're an enemy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one thing you guys haven't talked about yet is the fact that these kind of figures are not very tolerant to people living their lives the way they want to live them, as long as they respect the equal rights of other people to do the same.
Yeah.
And that's a very important part of the social contract.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the bottom line, however, is morality does not dictate who wins and loses in terms of what happens in the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's a guiding precept that most people choose to use, those who think about it. But unfortunately, just because you think right doesn't mean that the outcome is going to be the way you want it. And I think that's the thing about once you come up against some person who's willing to dehumanize large section of humanity, often the only response is you have to dehumanize right back in order to fight back.
Mm-hmm.
And it's unfortunate and goes against what a standard morality would preach, but, morality is not going to save our butts in a situation like that.
Yeah, I mean,
so we have to do what we have to do.
Yeah, I mean, at a certain point, you have to give over to practical considerations of just what do I need to do to defend myself? What do we need to do to remove a clear and present danger? And sometimes that may go again. I mean, you may end up having to do something that would be, in most instances, personally distasteful to you. I mean, a soldier in war, during a time of not war, is just a citizen. He's just a guy going to work and raising a family and doing a job. But if you suddenly have a situation where we're all called upon to defend our country or go and defeat the tyrant or what have you, those same average citizens, right, are going to be the guys strapping on machine guns shooting at other guys, something you would never, ever do. So again, situations do tend to crop up in which this is why moral absolutism, I think, just fails as a concept, because, as you said, you cannot just apply one set of acceptable behaviors for absolutely every circumstance that you're in and say, and this is what will work. I mean, can you? I don't think you can.
Now, one thing that's interesting is the notion of initiating force or initiating this kind of thing in the first place. Mm-hmm. Kind of like, well, if he shot first, then I could shoot, and I'm morally justified. Of course, that's very tricky because I'm sure that Hitler or Bin Laden or whatever are going to tell you about the thousands of ways they were transgressed to justify their thinking. But I think still initiation is an important part of this, because if you're going to attack someone for their ideas and they haven't actually done anything yet, they haven't initiated force or harmed anyone else, then that's very dangerous.
I think an interesting example is that in June 1967, Israel was surrounded by perhaps a factor of 10 greater armed and angry and fuming Arabs than they had of their own citizens, and they launched a preemptive strike, which was extremely successful in the Six-Day War. And were they justified in doing that?
Well, I would extend force to include a credible threat of force. If someone holds a gun up to you and asks you for your money, you don't have to wait for them to shoot to defend yourself. They have threatened
In fact, you
force.
probably can't. I mean,
Right. So it's not just force; it's also the credible threat of force. Threat
clear and present
powerful
danger.
message too.
Right.
But that's a good point too to bring up. Absolutely. Well, that's it. I just wanted to help bring the conversation forward a little bit.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rock. Appreciate it. All right. Yeah, I mean, let's get back to our favorite tyrants. I mean, when it became clear that these people were presenting, well, of course, in Hitler's case, he was already out there committing atrocities.
Yes.
But when you say that you can look at a certain situation in a certain country and say, this guy here, this tyrant, is presenting, a very clear and present danger to us and our way of life. Then can you say you have the moral high ground to do that, to do a preemptive action and take that person out? And I think you can. But it's interesting going back to this whole thing of justifying acts to yourself, even if you happen to be like loony. Isn't it? Don't you think that it's true though that in some cases, even someone who might be as megalomaniacal as Hitler, pretty much knows that what he's up to isn't going to fly with the bulk of the human race and other folk. Because
this comes down to how you draw the boundary between us and them.
Yeah. But let's take into account, for example, like Hitler, what the Nazis did was they staged an incident at the Polish border and used that to, so they faked it, and they knew they were faking it.
Yeah.
That was their pretext for the invasion of Poland that launched World War II. So if they had to fake something, they must have known, yeah, well, this, they must have, thinking, well, we're doing a bad thing. We're doing something that, most people wouldn't like or agree with, but maybe in the long run we'll be morally justified somehow.
Yeah.
But at that point you're into this horrible little circle of excuse making, aren't you?
It's clear, at least today, that Hitler's pretexts such as that were very, very thin veneers over brute force.
Yeah.
And his real belief was that the winners write history.
Yeah. Ashley, anything?
Nope.
Okay. I'm going to take Juan first because he's been holding for longer, and then we'll go to line one. Hi, you're on the air.
Hello, can you hear me well?
Yeah, we'll turn you up just a hair.
It would help to speak a little bit louder.
Yes. Go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yep.
We got you.
The comment that I'm going to make, it's regarding the topic you're covering today, which is, if I understand it well, a relationship between the atheists and morality. Okay. And I believe that this issue was settled a long time ago. I'd say pretty much with the French Revolution and onward, when religious governments were unseated from power and secular governments and secular laws were placed to substitute the religious government. The morality that we go by, that we live by, atheists and non-atheists, all the theists, including the clergy in Boston, we're all under the law. The different laws that are written in constitutions and supported by, the court system, the legislative system that writes the laws.
Yeah. So you're saying that when
we live under those laws, atheists particularly don't have to come up with a morality. It's already set there. Even before you are born into a family of atheists or a family of theists.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean,
here's my point.
Okay.
Secular laws already reflect our morality, and is not fixed. It's fluid. It's moving, and let's say in 400 years, if we wake up again in 400 years, we might find something very, very different when it comes to morality. If you brought today a pope that lived in the 800th century, if you brought him today and he saw how we run these things, and you took him to a nightclub with topless dancers, and
they probably have a great time,
and you took him to see how the government is run, and that the schools don't pray all day, or although they want to do that, the man would die again.
Well, yeah, I mean,
he would say, "What have you done? What did I do wrong that I did not guarantee a continuation of my morality into the future?"
Yeah.
Which goes back to
what I'm saying? Our morality today, the laws today, if we wake up in 400 years after we die, we're going to find something totally different. We have no guarantees where humanity is going.
Yeah. But aren't there, though, basic precepts that have, I mean, whether you're talking about 800 years ago or right now, there are certain precepts that have been generally adopted that help civilizations and cultures work.
Right.
Laws against theft, 100%. Laws against murder.
And my point is, it's already presented and it's embodied in the laws we have.
Yeah.
That the founding father gave us, whatever, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, Ashley, you go ahead.
Again, it just goes back to what I was saying earlier. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. Whatever is moral today was not moral 500 years ago and may not be moral again in 500 years from now. We're deciding at the time what is moral and what's good. And what it means to be good now is not going to apply.
I agree with you 100%, guys, and I don't want to take any more time of the other callers.
Okay, well, we appreciate your input, Juan.
Okay, I want to add one more thing, which is that the fact that something is written into law does not necessarily justify it. No. Again, in Nazi Germany, there were laws that forbade Jews to marry non-Jews. From today's perspective, I think we would mostly say that this was not morally justified, even though it was written into the law. And I might say that one of the things that made the German people susceptible to the influence of Hitler is that they were a very authoritarian society which exactly accepted laws as sufficient justification for behavior.
And that is exactly how I would characterize Christian morality, as authoritarian.
Yes.
It's just a list of rules from an authority figure, and it has the same problems that an authoritarian culture run by a tyrant like Hitler would have, wouldn't it? Yeah. But that's I'm glad you brought that up. We're going to go to Jeff on line 1. Hey, you're on the air.
Hi guys.
Hey, how you doing? Hey, Jeff.
Sorry, I was told I was third up, and someone must have hung up.
Oh, yeah, that's okay.
It'll take a couple of minutes to develop, but just bear with me here. Not too long. My feeling is that when we look at these questions, we're kind of I think making them too difficult. I think that specially we have an innate sense of community and an innate sense of self. I think that if we look at the higher animal kingdoms, such as the greater apes and things like that, we see that exhibited, empathy, protection, things like that within their communities. I think the problem arises when someone who has a overdeveloped sense of self is able to manipulate that sense of community and narrow the communities down, such as Hitler did, in narrowing down Germany into us against them, us against the Jews or us against the rest of the world. I think the way that we morally decide when to go up against someone like Hitler is when our innate sense of the rest of the world's innate sense of community. I think we know that these people are dangerous. I think we innately can recognize that danger and identify it. And when enough of the rest of the world decide that this is a problem, that our sense of community responds, and we go against it.
I might argue against that on the grounds that when we look at the detailed history of the entry of the United States into World War II, first of all, we didn't go to war against Japan until Japan attacked us.
Yeah.
Furthermore, we didn't go to war against Germany until Hitler declared war on the United States.
Yeah.
Similarly, the Soviet Union didn't go to war against Germany until Germany invaded Russia. The Soviet Union. I'm afraid there's a lot of rather narrow self-interest that was involved, and to look at the history of that time, there was disturbingly little altruism that went on.
Yeah, but in that case, what you could do though, the sense of community that that Jeff is talking about. Well, I mean, by that point, right, it's already been narrowed down to nations and cultures. So, I mean, as far as like Americans in the late 30s, our sense of community was America.
There was a great deal of isolationism.
Yeah,
there was, and that was caused by individuals within the United States and within the Soviet Union, and who were trying to, for various reasons, political, economic, whatever, keep us out of the war. I mean, specifically trying to keep us out of the war, and their point of view won over and narrowed our sense of community down a bit until we realized by them attacking us. I mean, I don't think this is something that crops up easily. I think it's very difficult for that sense of community to expand to include other countries or other peoples. But I think eventually it does, and I think that it does because we realize that eventually that's going to be us that they're coming looking for. Now. But I think that individuals like Hitler and Stalin and Osama are flawed individuals who have an overinflated sense of self, and they know how to work that sense of community into basically manipulate it into their own means.
Yeah. Well, I want to bring up something on the subject of sense of community, though, and get everyone's feedback on it, though. Isn't it true, though, that now I think it would be much, much harder today for a guy like Hitler to emerge of the magnitude that Hitler was? Mainly because back in the 30s, I mean, well, today we live in a world where it pretty much is this big global community, right?
That's right.
The internet hooks us all up. So, I mean, instantaneous global communication is a given in almost any household. Now, on the other hand, back in the 30s, right? I mean, okay, you had the telegraph and what have you, and radio and transcontinental, but it still wasn't there still wasn't this sense of just the world is in your pocket that we have today. Right. The world has gotten smaller today as a result of technology and just everything that results from that. So if you take like the two big bad guys, right? I mean, and we'll leave Saddam Hussein out of it for the time being, but like Osama bin Laden, okay, Hitler staged massive Nuremberg rallies with 20 million guys all in lockstep, right? Osama bin Laden is hiding in a cave. Okay, so it's a whole different situation now where people who are that power-crazed, tyrannical, megalomaniacal...
I'm afraid there are more Muslims in today's world than there were Germans in the 30s. They are... there is a substantial fraction of the Islamic world that wants to kill infidels.
Yeah, but if you look where those people come from, I think this illustrates my point to some extent. If you look where the problem areas of the world are, where the real violence is coming from, and specifically Islamic extremism, I think we'll find that those are places where the community is narrowed down, and they purposely isolate themselves from outside influences and from outside like news sources and things like that, and so the community is narrowed down to the point where control over that community is exhibited by the people who have an innate sense of wanting to keep themselves in power. And so, therefore, it's easy to make it us against them when the rest of the world looks at them and can't understand why.
Now, remember, us against them is what religious fundamentalism really, that's a big trump card that it likes to play.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. I think it's clear that the standoff between the Israelis and the Palestinians is largely fueled by the religious fundamentalists on both sides. It may very well be that the majority of the population on both sides of that issue would be glad to see peace and prosperity, but the small, vocal, violent minority on each side manages to keep the violence going.
Yeah, because they have an agenda to push.
I think that's generally the fact.
The same in Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, very much so.
But I think that the problem arises a lot where communities, or where places where communities feel powerless and to do anything really, and I think that's a big factor. I want to allow other callers to get in.
Okay.
But I just want to throw that out there.
Well, I had some good input.
Good show, guys.
Thank you. Yeah,
Thanks.
appreciate it. Some good points. Okay.
No.
Ty.
Ty online. I thought you were about to say something.
Well, no, that's not the name of the person.
Okay.
Hey, how's
Hi,
it
you're on
going,
the
guys?
air. How you doing? Thanks for holding.
Pretty good. Y'all been talking about the idea of might makes right in relation to Hitler's ideas, but that's what all of politics is based on, the idea that a majority rules.
Well,
Majority rule is the might, so to speak. Just because more idiots exist than right-minded people does not mean that their ideas are better.
well, but then again, the question that we were starting from was, yeah, I mean that what you're talking about now is a situation of this is what happens when politics comes into play, and but preceding politics, the moral precepts that exist. Where does one get one's ideas that then one can use to manipulate using the political spectrum to justify any sort of act that you want to.
But politics is also based on moral precepts as well.
Yeah, but politics can be the tool that someone like a Hitler or another Stalin can use. To say, this will now enable me to wield the power that I need to do what I think is right, and I really don't care.
Of course, the founding fathers, and especially Thomas Jefferson, believed that the real solution to these issues was that if there is sufficient open communication and education of the people, that they will finally make the right decisions.
Yeah.
Is there truth in that? Are we seeing a problem with that today because of the concentration and the power of a few large corporations to control mass communications?
Yeah, I mean that's boy. Now we're into this. See how broad-reaching a spectrum this topic is. Yeah.
You always have to reconsider that might does not always make right.
Well, certainly it didn't in Germany.
No.
Yeah.
At least we think it didn't.
Yeah. See, and that's. I mean, I very strongly object to that whole justification. That to me. See, to me, that's in a nutshell Christianity, right? You have this divine, all-powerful authority, and you do what he says, and what he says goes. And if you don't do what he says, well, then he's bigger and stronger than you, and he'll toss you in hell for all eternity.
It's certainly not only the case with Christianity, it's equally true of Islam.
Yeah.
And in fact, although the community of fundamentalist Jews is much smaller than either of those two, they do their damage when they can, limited only by their capabilities.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that one needs to avoid this whole fallacy of might makes right at all costs.
Exactly.
And what do we have to put in its place when somebody like Hitler or Osama bin Laden rears his ugly head?
Yes, it always will be majority rules.
Yeah.
That's the case.
Yeah, well, in a practical sense, you're probably right. But again, I have to say, when you're defending yourself from a clear and present danger, the justification for doing so is not might makes right. It's we're going to be hurt. We have a right to protect ourselves and our way of life and our safety.
If I look at Stalin in the 1930s,
I mean, there's no guarantee you'll beat the
when he
tyrant.
killed millions of Soviet citizens, it was clear and present danger that he was raising as the justification for this. Counter-revolutionaries, capitalists.
Yeah, but again, I mean, not everyone is I think, sane and sensible in what they think about themselves.
Exactly.
I mean, you have guys, as Jeff Jones was mentioning in the earlier call, right, who have this inflated sense of self-importance, a sense of self-righteousness, a sense of being above the rest of humanity, not being part of the group, not being part of the culture and the body politic, but
the problem,
being this, they have this messianic ideas about themselves. Go ahead.
The problem is always going to be that the majority is going to be taken as the right or the might. And that's our whole problem.
Yeah, well,
the smaller voice is never going to be above the rest.
Well,
but the smaller voice has
the smaller voice may be the correct voice.
But the smaller voice has a chance to get itself heard, to even just a small community amongst it in itself, and grow from there. If its ideas are justified,
yes.
Again, it was the idea that slavery was okay. A few people said, no, that really kind of sucks.
Yeah.
Their idea eventually caught on.
Yeah, but again, you have to have a culture in place that will allow a minority to express its views in the first place.
Of
and
course.
in a
But
culture,
again, even in a small place, even in
where you have a megalomaniac ruling as a dictator, you're not going to allow the opposing team to.
Well, it's not officially allowed. They're not going to get a TV show to themselves or anything. But but again, they can still talk amongst friends. Yeah. They can still convince other people in their social arena that no, this is not the way to go.
But we do have the public access forum, and that's great.
Yeah. So hooray for America, right?
Yes.
So anything else?
Also, Martin.
Yes.
I appreciate y'all's intellectual banter, but it's zoology, not zoology.
Zoology.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
If it were zoology, there would be 3 O's. There's only 2, so it's zoology.
Zoology.
I just wanted to correct you on that. I'm sorry. I love you. I love Jeff D.
All right.
I just wanted to correct you on that. It's zoology, not zoology.
Okay, I've got it.
All right.
Stored,
sorry about that. I just had to throw it in.
No, excellent. Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Martin.
Yes. Might shock some of our viewers at home to realize I'm not
hung up with the wrong person.
Yeah, we did. Damn it. Oh well.
Sorry. We hung up on the wrong person.
That was the solid light, was it not? No. Please call.
Wasn't.
Please call back if we can get you in the next few minutes. The show's almost over anyway. So, okay. Any concluding thoughts?
Well, I think we've argued it out well. I don't know that we've come to any serious conclusion. You may think
darn us atheists. Yeah. all I know is that I think that I have a reasonably good idea of what I think works.
Well, and so did Hitler.
But again, but I'm not rallying millions of troops to my side and claiming that I'm the savior of the world. I mean, I'm not a megalomaniac, and he was.
If you thought that would work, though, would you?
So I. Dream. Have that little Cartman dream from South Park where he's like, "Yeah, it's cool." Okay. So anyway, we have a call on line 1. Hey, you're on the air.
Hello?
Hi, sorry about that.
Hey, that's no problem. Call back real fast.
Okay.
I've got a question.
Yes.
Imagine, if you will,
all right,
beautiful woman, and like right in the middle of her chest, she had one titty with you stuck on it.
Well, yeah. Thanks. Okay.
It would then be morally justified.
Well, why not? Okay. So let's see. Well, there we are. I can morally justify anything. It's easy. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that in the end, there's no real one all-purpose answer for all of it, right? I mean, you can't strictly say, well, it's just the majority can dictate what's wrong, or you can't just say, well, if this one particular loony tyrant says that he can do this sort of thing, then why can't he? I mean, it's like there are so many gray. It's a big gray area. There's no black and whites to it. It's just this big, multifaceted shades of gray, is it not? Yeah. So sorry.
That sucks.
I wanted answers.
Yeah. See, well, we don't. But you're a scientist. You should know we don't ever have 100% certain answers about anything. We only have what's provisionally true.
The scientist part, I mean, we do sometimes come up with definitive answers in science, but there is an unbridgeable divide between questions of fact and questions of value. And what's at issue here is questions of value.
Yeah. Well, I think that, what's best for the greater good matters. Actions having consequences. I think that's a sound and sensible way to base your moral precepts on. And there may be something better, much better, but I don't claim to have all the answers. See, you're the wise professor. That's why we want all the answers from you.
My role is like Socrates. I get to ask the questions.
Okay. Well, it was I think a very interesting conversation. We're always delighted to have you on the show. Come back anytime, please.
Thank you.
Dr. Alan Glatzer, thanks, Ashley. Our huge crew and studio audience, thanks for showing up and supporting us. This show is on every Sunday, 4:30 p.m. live, and our reruns. We have reruns 4:30 p.m. on Tuesdays on this channel. So we'll see you next time. And remember, theists, we don't hate you. We just think you're wrong. Bye-bye.
Everybody have a good weekend.
Take care.
It's over. Go back to work.
Okay.